Hello, listeners, and welcome to another sexy episode of Please Me, the podcast that aims to destigmatize conversations about sex by turning the sheets into our classroom. I want to mention here that I am so pleased to see listeners are tuning in, not just in the US, but in Europe, Asia, Africa, South America, and even down under. Thanks for listening, and please tell your friends. Sharing is caring, after all. Today, I have such an incredible guest to introduce to you, and I am so excited to interview her. Her name is Julieta Chiara, and she has a very impressive resume. Julieta is an experienced sex blogger and influencer, and her mission is to elevate and modernize adult brands and help them to maximize their effectiveness in the digital marketplace. Julieta studied human sexuality and while doing so created her incredible sex blog on julietachiara.com. She is a master in marketing the world of pleasure as a sex expert, influencer, and coach, but that is not all, everyone. If you have not tuned in to episode number 9, where I talk about kinks and fetishes, you will want to go back and check it out because it ties in here with Julieta's personal specialties, which include BDSM, Kink, and Shibari, or Japanese rope bondage. I am already getting warm, and we haven't even talked yet. So let's get this interview started. And let me welcome the incredibly beautiful and talented Julieta Chiara. Welcome to Please Me, Julieta. How are you today?
What an intro. Thank you so much for having me, Eve. I appreciate you spreading the good word and getting such diverse voices and people on here to help listeners realize that sex is so broad, so nuanced, and everything is welcome. So thank you for having me.
Of course. Thank you for being here. So I'm curious because we just talked about some of your personal faves. What was your introduction to BDSM? And I want to know personally if you are a dominant or a submissive or both.
Yeah, people get a little confused when I let them know I'm entirely submissive. I think I think sometimes the misconception is because I am a Japanese trained Shibari rigger. So they assume they're like, oh, you must be a dominant. I'm like, nope, I am fully submissive. And in BDSM context and personal stance, I am always the submissive. I've tried the other way, everybody. I have given it a fair shot. And it was being dominant was certainly not for me. My first round with that was when I was quite young, and it wasn't in the most professional grounds of BDSM, but I had an ex-boyfriend who started to fool around with spanking or pulling my hair. And when you're 17 years old, I don't think you have the context for knowing that that's BDSM. But then
Right.
later in time, that definitely grew. I was like, oh my God, this is BDSM, this is sensation play. And that's what grew my kinks and fetishes from there. So starting slow in what I thought was a vanilla context.
Amazing. That sounds like, it sounds like a typical introduction, just here and there. You get a spank here, you get a hair pull there, and next thing you know, you're exploring more and more, if those things are things that you enjoy. So it's wonderful to see that you kind of took that and grew with it, and explored your sexuality, which is what I really encourage everybody to do. That's what this is all about. Um, with 40% of Americans polled claiming to be a kinky person and over a third claiming to have a specific kink or fetish, I just want to emphasize here that this is not a fringe subject or conversation. This is a huge part of our society. And this is a lot of people saying that they're interested in out of the box thinking when it comes to sex. But what I see is as an issue is people not being comfortable talking about sex in order to tell their partners that they have sexually creative interests. How do you encourage your coaching clients to have these conversations?
I think the first thing is destigmatizing what kink or out of the box means. And when you look up kink or the definition of kink, it literally just means sexual behaviors outside of the normal. And then, so my next question to people I coach is like, what's normal? Is there a definition? Is there a standard of what's normal practice? There's not. And so that means kink or your sex life is whatever you want to define it as. What I find kinky, you might find entirely vanilla, or what I find vanilla, you might find to be the most taboo kink that's ever existed. So it's incredibly hard to feel shyness or shame around something that you get to define on your own. So I find that to be a really good turn of a headspace in order to get people having the conversation and being a little more flexible.
That's so true. If you're making the definition yourself and you're creating it yourself, this is entirely for you. And so it really kind of puts the shame behind you, you know, and you know, allows you to kind of explore, which is, I think, amazing. Um, so let's get a little personal here. What is your role in the world of kink? And can you share your personal favorite fetish?
Ooh. Well, there's a little tiny bit of a difference between a kink and a fetish. So we'll definitely get into.
Yes.
In terms of kink, it's for me, I'm definitely a submissive. So I like to play in many submissive roles and I like to use tools to accentuate that. So I'm very much into psychological play. I like
Okay.
humiliation, degradation, and I like undertones of a dom daddy little girl dynamic, which
Okay.
which is very psychological. And then for the tools, I mean, obviously I love ropes.
Yes.
I was like very evidently like those. I love spanking. I love any type of bondage, all the tools. I'm always down to try a little bit of everything. What might surprise people is I actually don't like pain. So while I'll do everything, I don't pass a pain threshold in my play. Now, in terms of fetish, so fetish is usually something that you absolutely need in order to feel sexual desire, versus kink is more of, I think, an interest or an activity. Ironically, for me, the dom sub dynamic is a fetish for me. I usually don't feel much sexual desire if that's not present within
Okay.
in my sexual interactions. So mine are a bit complex, but I'd be curious to hear if you have any.
Oh, now you're getting personal. I love my feet to be worshipped and kissed and sucked, and you know, I love a good, you know, foot fetish. So I definitely, and you know, again, I'm not alone. If you look up, you know, the top five, you know, fetishes, that's one of them. You know, so it's certainly pretty common. But I love, you know, pretty shoes, but mostly I love my feet massaged and paid attention to. And the reason is that there is so many sensory receptors in your feet and in your hands. I mean, our bodies are wired for pleasure, right? Head to toe, we have so much sensory receptors in our body that are screaming for pleasure. And our feet is one of those areas where there are many. So if you haven't tried it, I definitely suggest you go get a foot massage or you have your partner, you know, give your feet a little bit more attention. What do you say to that? She's nodding over there.
For real. I mean, I never thought I would be so into feet play until I finally, just like you, had my experiences with someone going the extra mile to give my feet attention. And even, yeah, like toe sucking, all of this, it's so sensational. And it is the nerve endings, or maybe it's just because we don't typically think of stimulating our hands or our feet in that way. And then added in, especially in a BDSM context, um, the concept of feet can be very interesting for some people in some cultures, right? And so
Mhm.
even though we're taking it as like a very like empowering worshipy thing, for some other people it can also resemble a more degrading aspect, which can play into their kinks and their fetishes. So I
Absolutely.
find it
Mhm.
very interesting how we get to put our meanings to them.
That's true because, in certain parts of the world, your feet are considered dirty because they're walking on the ground, and you come into the house and you immediately take your shoes off because you don't want to bring that dirt into the home. And so, yeah, that's so true that there are definitely different meanings associated with feet all around the world. So that's very interesting to think about how that affects that particular kink, in different places. So yeah, something to look into for sure.
Absolutely.
I love doing research about these things because it just really is so interesting, you know?
Next time you get tied up, think about wrapping we tend to always play with at least like the leftover rope that we have that's not being used in a weight bearing area of the body. If we can, we wrap it around the toes. It's very nice. Feels really good.
Mm, interesting. I've never been tied up before. It's on my list. It's on my bucket list. So definitely would love to learn a little bit more about that. Why don't you tell me a little bit about your rope playing and how you got into it, and all of that?
Absolutely. I got into rope bondage in a little bit of an abstract way in the sense that I didn't know much about it until I was doing a nude photo shoot about 7 years ago. And my photographer, who's a friend, was Japanese. And towards the end, he asked me, he's like, would you like to be tied in Shibari, which is the Japanese word. It just means to tie. If you want to use the more traditional word, you would use kinbaku, which means the art of rope tying. And
Okay.
I was in this photo shoot. He's like, you want to get tied up? I was like, sure, why not? I don't really know what that means. So I have photos of the day that I first tried it. And it was so beautiful. I loved it so much and I loved the sensation. And from there, I experimented by myself for the next 4 or 5 years with the rope bondage. Now, what's different about Shibari than just any other rope bondage is that there's so much history to it. It is a Japanese form of art that came from martial arts and it was used for imprisonment. So it has an interesting, kinky history to it. And I've loved it because it's more artistic. It has more S&M feel sometimes. And that's exactly why I came back from Japan a month ago. I went to study in Japan to get
Oh, wow.
yeah, I spent a month in Tokyo getting my license to teach professional Japanese rope bondage from a master. It was really intense.
Wow. That sounds incredible. Wow. Were there a lot of other students or was it one on one?
Both. So it was one-on-one. It was the most intense thing I've ever done. What differs between Western and the traditional is in the traditional space, you're doing a lot of what we call suspension. So that means hanging out in the air versus a lot of Western, you just do stuff on the floor and you do it for sex. With the Japanese style not necessarily being primarily for sex, it's more about the shape of the body, the compromise, how far you can push someone. Uh, and so my model, who's my best friend, came and we did 40 hours in 1 week straight of
Wow.
training with a master. And I mean, it pushed us both to the brink, physically, mentally, but I had to do it because I feel like there's a sense of cultural appropriation if you're not willing to go and learn from a master and you want to be, promoting yourself as a master, you want to be teaching people, you want to be selling your product. I felt this insane need of responsibility of I need to respect this, I need to be accepted into a lineage, and I need to learn from the best. So that's exactly what I took myself to go do.
I love that thought process. It's so important to be respectful of other cultures when we're taking their art form and, saying that we're now experts in it. So I applaud you for doing that. And now I definitely want to sign up when you come to Miami and teach a class. That sounds amazing. I would love to learn a little bit more about that. I personally find bondage to be very scary because, you are giving up 100% control. And as a submissive, you enjoy that. For me, there's much more of a trust thing. I really have to trust 100%. And so being tied up definitely is scary for me. For me, but I love the aesthetic of the shibari. I think it just looks so beautiful, just visually. And I love it as an art form too. And it's interesting that it has a history in tying up prisoners, or that I did not know. So I think that that's super interesting, a martial arts type of history. So history is so key. It brings us where we are today, and if we're not looking at that, we're really missing a big piece of what we're doing. So I applaud you for that as well.
Thank you. And you're not the only person who thinks that bondage is scary. The reason being is if I would have looked at just typical bondage, I'm like, fuck yeah, this is scary. You see the stuff, it's very intense, it's very sexual. So it was very interesting meeting my master and him saying, I have no interest in the kinky space or in S&M. This is about history, beauty, and safety. And so I would like to compare for people listening that depending on the master you go with, if you do traditional Shibari, I would explain it more as a somatic experience. And
Okay.
it still has the intensity that some people are looking for. Like, for example, have you ever had a somatic experience after a deep tissue massage or something very, very hard on the body, and afterwards maybe you feel euphoria or you feel vulnerable, like an ice bath or something?
Or
It's
like a release of emotion or something like that.
Yes. So it's very much a somatic release for the person experiencing it. But that's not to mitigate what you said. It does take trust. You're deeply surrendering to someone else, but that
Right.
translates to a lot of kinks and fetishes where it's almost more profound than quote unquote vanilla sex because you have a lot more to surrender and a lot more to give.
Yes, I mean, you're putting your whole person in the hands of somebody else, to protect and to take care of. And so you have to make sure that that other person, you know, is the right person to do that with, because you are completely surrendering. And depending on where they tie you up, you may not be able to move, which I think that's the part that scares me the most. Being left somewhere, all tied up and nowhere to go, and you're just kind of there, can't help yourself. So that, obviously a lot of conversation has to be had. And I want to talk right now about consent, because that is got to be huge in this arena. I want to highlight here too that no always means no, and it's always okay to get up and walk away in any sexual situation that you don't feel comfortable in. This is particularly true with something like Shibari or in the BDSM world, and consent is constant. Can you give me a scenario of how continual consent is played out in let's just say like a Shibari scene?
Yeah. And I mean, you're asking the right person. I just held my enthusiastic consent course. So it's just, it
Nice.
is the best thing. And I think the vanilla world, they have a lot to learn about from the kinky world. Because yes, in the kinky
Yes.
world, we have the most apparent and continued forms of consent. So in the sense of tying someone up, if you were to come here I have a home studio where I teach and I tie others up before you even come, we're already talking a little bit about consent, which is agreeing to like the time, the place, what to wear, what do you feel comfortable wearing, what do you want to get out of the experience, how do you want to feel. When you get here, we reaffirm that consent. It doesn't matter that you told me 20 hours ago. We come here, we talk through it again. What are we going to do? How are we going to do it? What are you okay with? What are you not okay with? Is there a safe word you want to use or a safe action that's going to symbolize needing to stop through the process? And then, yes, validating that whatever happens, you're allowed to pull out whenever you wish to. While we're tying up, Consent also looks like me asking, are you okay? Do you need a modification? Where are you feeling this in the body? And you go so forth. And even as you're finishing up the experience, that consent still goes through. Could I have done something better? How do you feel? What do you need right now? It might feel intense for people because we're not taught to be that consensual. We're not as consenting as we should be. And so if you're not used to that, you might think, wow, like this is a lot of follow-up. A lot of people are like, it was a yes or a no. I'm like, it's more than that. It's more than that. So it's a very wholesome experience to where you always have a voice and someone's always checking in on you. And that is subject to change at any given point in time without any form of retaliation or shame.
Absolutely. You have to consent throughout. And I am always kind of trying to, teach that you can always you always have an out no matter what. I mean, I speak to a lot of people who are, having sexual experiences and really don't have a voice. They're not they're not consenting. They're not even asking for things that are so basic like contraception. And it really surprises me and is a big reason why I wanted to have this podcast in the first place, because I want to make sure that people understand that they have a voice and they are allowed to say no at any time, whether the person, bought you a car or, or just a dinner or, whatever it may be, that no matter what the circumstances are, if you are in a position where you're uncomfortable, you can always get up and leave. And you can, say that you're not, comfortable and you can go. And so consent is something that's so important just generally in vanilla sex that I think people are not even talking about in vanilla sex. But when you look at BDSM, it's so integrated into what you do that you are making sure that the person that, is in the submissive role is constantly consenting, constantly comfortable, constantly enjoying themselves, or not if you like degradation, but that would be enjoyment for you, right? So yeah, absolutely. Consent is so key. And I'm so excited that you just did a workshop on that because it is amazing. And later we can tell the listeners where to find that, because that is just something super, super important for people to know.
The concept of consent, it's funny how many vanilla people I teach, because yes, they would rather learn it from a kinky person. And, then consent comes with things like communication and feedback and boundaries and expectations. So if you can really get that strong platform of consent working like a muscle inside of your body, the rest usually follows quite easily. But knowing and harnessing your consent is the first point of you having a voice for advocating for yourself.
Absolutely. And that is so important for people to advocate for themselves in any kind of sexual experience. And particularly, even more so when you're doing things like Shibari or, anything that's kind of limiting your movement, so definitely getting that consent and continually, because you may be okay for an hour, but then maybe it starts to become uncomfortable, and being able to voice your concerns or your discomfort is important. So yeah. All right, so let's talk about control. Control is really appealing to a lot of people, playing with control. Some people like to be in control. Some people like to lose control and let someone else be in control. Tell me what you find interesting about being a submissive in particular.
Well, when we look at the context of BDSM, being in control or not being in control, those are just tools. What I like to ask people, it's, how do you want to feel? How do you want to feel? Do you want to feel like you're giving, like you're caring for someone? Do you want to feel like someone is caring for you? Do you want to feel effortless or free? And that's when you can pick. It's like, do you want the control? Do you want to be dominant or do you want to be submissive? And even then, that doesn't mean necessarily being controlling, right? And for myself, I like my, I don't like feeling like I'm getting controlled. I like feeling like I'm getting taken care of. And what that
I
does
like
is
that too. Hmm.
it lets my brain shut off. The reason being is because control is an aspect that gives me a lot of stress in my day to day because I'm a very controlling person. I
Right.
run three businesses. I have employees. I have my own home. I live in the middle of this wild ass jungle. Like living in Tulum is probably like living in Burning Man 24/7. It's not easy. And so I am always on. And for lack of better terms, what we would say here is like I'm in my masculine energy. I'm on top of it. I'm controlling everything. And so the biggest gift someone can give me is letting my brain turn off and taking me through an experience and directing the scene and planning something. So shifting a little bit of that narrative of maybe control to just authority, or because authority can be very caretaking, right? So that's what it means to me. I'm curious how's that's played in for you or maybe some of the people that you talk to.
Yeah, well, for me, I would say that I have a hard time letting go of control. um, yes, I definitely love to be taken care of, and I love that as well. So if somebody is going to, you know, be more in the controlling role, they have to be very nurturing as well, because I do love to be taken care of. Um, but I would define myself as more of a switch because I like control and I also like to submit. So I kind of, I enjoy both. Let's just put it that way. I enjoy both. And I like to explore both. I mean, both are incredible. You know, they both give you a certain kind of intense high that you wouldn't experience, you know, in a regular vanilla setting. So definitely playing on both sides of that is really a whole lot of fun.
Oh yeah.
Um,
You're getting both
so
types of euphoria.
what's that?
You're getting both types of euphoria.
Definitely. Yeah, because there is a euphoria in giving, you know, the spankings, as well as there is a euphoria in receiving the spankings. It's different, but the energy is there for both sides, and it's really enjoyable for both sides. So definitely encourage people to try it out sometime.
But it's lovely to have me as a submissive, you as a switch, so you have dominant values. And that I think it makes it easier for whoever's listening to understand what dominance and submission actually means. Because yes, there's the power exchange, there's the control exchange, but as intense as it is, it doesn't it's not, none of it is unconsensual, none of it is abusive, none of it is like violent or over the top. um or it may look that way, right? But there's so much care and planning and fun that goes into making that happen, and
Absolutely.
we all get to just simmer inside of it.
And I'm glad that you mentioned fun because, you know, sexual activity, you know, in any form is how adults play. This is our playground, you know, and so it should always be fun. And if you're not having fun, you're not doing it right, you know?
Right, that's, I would say, the number one thing that happens when I'm coaching couples is they come in and they are so serious. I'm like, you're calm down. Like you're not. this isn't the Hunger Games. Like nothing's gonna happen to you if you don't do it right, or so I do exercises that I do some exercises that tend to be a little bit goofy, but I do it so they can break down that barrier because I'm like, this is not 50 Shades of Grey. You don't need to have the room with all the tools. You don't need to be controlling and violent. You don't need to be so submissive that it makes you question who you are as a human being. You get to have fun. You get to make it fun and it's playtime. And like you're right. You're like when you were little, you had no problems role playing by playing house or acting up little scenes together and stuff. So it's the concept is very much inside of you. You
That's
didn't lose it.
very true.
It's just a different
Mhm.
context.
Different context, but similar. You're right, and it's playtime. It's adult playtime. So I encourage people to really kind of just be playful. Giggle, laugh. If something funny happens, just take a break and roll around laughing. I mean, it's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be something that you're enjoying with somebody else, or more than one person, whatever that may be for you. But definitely it's supposed to be a fun time. So I definitely encourage people to explore, and have a good time enjoying the different exploration that they choose together. And having those conversations is so important. Telling your partner what you want, what you enjoy, what you like is so key. And when you think about the statistics, 80% of women fake orgasm, and you can see that not a lot of people are really expressing what their likes and desires are. And it's very sad, and I want to encourage people to express their likes and desires so that you can really get your needs met and be fulfilled in your sexual experiences. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh my God. Yeah, and it's a big part of the work I do. A big part of the work I do, and I'm sure the work that you do, it's you have to find that voice. Without the voice, really none of the above can happen. Kink's not gonna happen, orgasms aren't gonna happen. I always I always have a little bit of a joke that I say it's like, being able to ask for what you want in the bedroom, being able to ask for your orgasm is going to make you more empowered in the outside world too. Because if you struggle to ask for what you want in your pleasure, I'm sure you also struggle with asking for a raise. I'm sure you struggle with sending food back because they made it wrong. There's all these things where it's like, it's not just the sex part, it's how do we empower our voice as a whole? And how do we empower what we want as a priority, regardless of whether it's the orgasm, the money, or the food?
Right. How to, yeah, definitely. How to just be more, verbal in what you want, how to empower yourself. That is so key, to life. Absolutely. In the boardroom and in the bedroom.
Bedroom, yeah. If you can ask for that crazy orgasm with a squirting end, I have a high probability you know how to ask for the raise you deserve.
That's true. That's so true. Yep, that's I like to talk about BCE, or big clit energy, and having that voice really does empower you to have that BCE, and I definitely hope that all of the listeners out there definitely, um, have that as a goal, because we all should be getting our needs met. And there's such a thing as an orgasm gap, where men are up here with their orgasms, getting orgasms almost every time they have sex, and women are down here, not getting their orgasms met. And not that sex should be about orgasms, but the fact that the orgasm gap exists is why I keep talking about it, because I feel like one person at a time we can change the orgasm gap so that it becomes more equal, because
Mm.
a woman's pleasure is equal to a man's pleasure. And if we're only focused on the man's pleasure when you're having sexual experiences, the orgasm gap will always be there.
Always.
So talking about these things is so key.
Exactly. And that's where it's like, okay, you can ask It's like what's gonna take to fill your personal orgasm gap? It's like, is it kinky stuff you
Yes.
want to try? Is it sensation play? Is it stuff that you liked while you're masturbating? Finding that palette and basically being able to construct a little mental menu of, I know what's going to make me come every single time. And then how do I communicate that? How do I make that happen? So I'd be curious to hear in your sphere of the world, what are the most common reasons that people have an orgasm gap? For mine, it's fear of rejection, shame, that's why they don't want to speak up and ask for what they want, or not exploring their own bodies. I'd say those are probably the top three reasons why I'm seeing an orgasm gap in my space.
Yeah, I mean, not knowing your own body is number one. I mean, if you don't know how to orgasm yourself, there is no way you can possibly teach someone else, how to make you orgasm. So that's number one, having to, know what turns you on, what makes you get there so that you can share that with your partner. Um, Also, psychologically, I think women have, that little person in their head saying, do I look good? Is this a good angle? Is my butt too big or is my butt too small? you know, um, all of those things, mess with your mind. And if you're not 100% present in the moment, it's going to be very difficult to reach, an orgasm. It may all feel lovely and wonderful, but you have to constantly be bringing yourself back to the moment. So these, BDSM, in my opinion, is a very clear path to being very in the moment because it's something that you are it's not just something you do, it's something you constantly discuss. You're agreeing to the scenario that's going to be happening. You're agreeing to all of the parts of it, and you're very present in the moment, and constantly checking in. So I do think that it can be a very good avenue towards decreasing that orgasm gap for yourself, if that's an interest of yours, because it does keep you present and in the moment. Wouldn't you agree?
It does. It's the sensation. And then it also expands that arousal time. Instead of having that 5-minute quickie, if you're busy tying
Yes.
up or you're busy massaging someone or using a tool on them, especially for the female body, you extend that arousal time, which we need. We need at the very least, 20 minutes of being aroused in order to truly even think about surrendering to an orgasm. So, extending that time through an activity to help you relax and to feel is going to get you much closer.
That's so true. And, for men in partnered play, it typically takes around 5 to 7 minutes in order to reach orgasm. And for women, it takes up to 25 minutes or more. I know for me, it's way more than 25 minutes a lot of times, So extending that play time, that sensation play is so key. And like I said before, our bodies were built for pleasure. We have so many sensory receptors on our body from head to toe. And if you think about reflexology, and I'm not an expert in reflexology at all, but if you've ever seen the chart of the foot with all of the different organs, each organ pertains to a certain part of your foot, and so massaging the foot is such a powerful tool for healing and for so many other things. But if you get that one spot right, sometimes it almost feels like it's directly connected to your clitoris, as are other parts of your body, your erogenous zones like your nipples, or sometimes, a kiss on the back of the neck. All of those things, everything, your body is so interconnected, the nervous system. And so sometimes exploring all of those areas is really going to help get you to the place where you need to be. And these are the things that you have to take note of when you're having sex so that you can tell your partner what you really love, so that they can help you. Because our partners do want to pleasure us. Wouldn't you agree?
I would hope they do, right? That's another thing to mention here. It's if your partner's not going to give you the time of day to listen to what you want, and if you're sitting down and saying, I need this to feel good, if that's for any reason disregarded or not at least up on the table for, some communication, then you got to look at a new partnership.
Right, right.
It's like
Exactly.
your partner should want to see you in the highest form of pleasure. Your partner should want to be interested in what makes you feel good. And so if what's hindering you from closing your orgasm gap is because you already know it's falling on deaf ears, you got a lot more to worry about, girlfriend. You got to take a step back. But we're hoping that, yes, I would say 90% of really incredible partners that I talk to, all they want is to see their partner in pleasure. And the orgasm gap, it could equally hurt our partners as much as us because they're like, we want to make you feel good, but we don't know. You don't know what you want, or we don't know if this is good or not. You're not giving any feedback. So it's a two-way street where we can help each other.
And what hurts them more is faking it, because then you're training them to do things that you don't particularly like or that aren't getting you there. So, faking it is a really bad idea.
Yes. And faking it doesn't help build trust. So then if you want to move to things like BDSM, kink, fetish, it's going to be really hard to do those in a really safe place if you're not used to being completely transparent and honest. Because then it's like, are you doing this kink because you actually want to, or because you think I want to? So that authenticity needs to trail out from beginning to end.
Definitely, definitely. I completely agree. Well, I'm going to ask you one last question because I know we need to keep an eye on the time. And this is just a fun question that I like to ask all of my guests. What is your favorite sex position?
Ooh, that's a great question. I've been simmering on this because it's shifted for me in the last year, which I never thought
Okay.
would. And so I was like a doggy style girl through and through. I really was. But now after being able to really connect with my G spot, and finally in the last year I learned how to squirt, which was amazing. I found that now I enjoy being on top, but more as like a seated position. Like my partner sitting up and me sitting on top of them. So I'm able to get like a nice grind on their stomach while I also get penetration. So that face to face sitting pretzeled into each other, that's my new favorite. But
Okay. So
I was
it's kind of like a cowgirl position, right?
yeah, a little more pressed in and intimate, but
A
yeah,
seated cowgirl. Okay.
I was a doggy style girl through and through for about 10 years. So this really threw my mind for a loop because I was like, I'm
Wow.
a new person.
And what's amazing is that, through all of that exploration, you found something that you love just as much as doggy style, if not more, and as we move forward in our lives, things are going to change. Our bodies are going to change, and the positions that get you there are going to change. So being open to that exploration is just such a beautiful thing.
I love it. Now I get to reflect on this identity crisis I'm having. I'm like, oh, man, I know. Tried
You can
and
like both positions. You can like them all.
it's true. You're right.
I am so honored that you were able to come on Please Me today and give all of my listeners something to ponder and fantasize about. And I thank you for that. I want to be sure that all my listeners can find you. So please let them know where they can find you.
Of course. The easiest way to find me in my day to day is through Instagram. It's at Julieta Chiara. But if not, everything I do, the blogs, my services is all on julietachiara.com. So same name for everything. Quick Google search, you'll find everything you need as well.
Perfect. So don't forget julietachiara.com. No matter what your kink, fetish, or sexual interest is, What is clear is that your creative interests are shared by many others, and kink is not a fringe community, but a gigantic one, and it is here to stay. This is why it is so important to discuss these conversations with your partner and feel empowered to do so. If you are hearing this and need direction, don't be shy to go to pleaseme.online and reach out to me or to experts like Julieta who are helping others to navigate this world. You can also reach out to me for sexual health concerns such as incontinence, erectile dysfunction, decreased vaginal sensitivity and dryness, painful intercourse, or any other sexual health concern that you may have. I treat these conditions in my physical therapy practice where I specialize in sexual health. Transformation comes from within, and I hope to help get you there by bringing you incredible content like this interview each week to expand your mind and help you get your BCE or Big Clit Energy confidence. Thank you for tuning in, and until next time.